Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the MoxiePod. I'm Sonia and this is Sarah. Together we have a Cerebral Palsy podcast where we have a very open discussion about CP, talking everything about it. The challenges, the funny, the good, and the achievements. Let's start building a better mindset together.
Thank you, Sonia. Today's guest, Layla, is someone whose voice is not just powerful, but deeply grounded in community, creativity, and lived experience. She's a columnist in the Scottish Community magazine, a public speaker, a dog mom, and in the midst of becoming a life coach. Through her writing, she invites readers into a world that is both deeply personal and universally human. I'm so excited to welcome her to the podcast today. So, hello, Layla.
There. That's a
Thank you for
wonderful
joining
introduction.
us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? Where you grew up and how that community shaped who you are today.
So I grew up in a place called Greenock, which is in the west end of Scotland, which is why I have this accent. And I
Love it.
grew up I grew up with my twin brother and my older sister and my parents until I was 16 years old. I grew up in a kind of household that was very encouraging when it came to independence. And not, I wouldn't say like being normal, but just achieving as much as you possibly can. I feel that's probably the best way to describe it. We didn't have a lot of discussions about disability when I was younger. That's kind of something we're evolving into as I get older.
Huh. And you said you moved out at 16?
No, what happened? Strangely, my parents got divorced, and
Okay.
my dad works abroad, and
Okay.
my mum moved out of the house. So we were actually left in the family home, and my parents left the house.
Oh.
So it's a strange way to do it, but that's how it's done.
Yeah. What does living with CP mean to you in your daily life, and how do you navigate the good and the bad it brings?
So I try and always put humor in a lot of what I'm saying. So I would just say that my body kind of makes up its own rules daily. So the game changes pretty much every day. Some days I'm able to do more things. Some days I would struggle with things I was fine with yesterday. Some days I have more pain and less pain. Yeah, I think it's the struggle has been finding a balance between achieving what you want to achieve and doing what you need to do to stay healthy and to
Totally.
do things in the best way. So,
How have
um,
you navigated that challenge of finding ways to do what you want to do or live the best way, but also taking care of yourself?
badly. Yeah,
It's so hard.
um, badly, I would say. It's something I'm still kind of learning as I'm getting older. I would be so focused on what I wanted to do that I would not look after myself properly. Like I'm terrible for not drinking enough water.
Oh my
Mm-hmm.
God. Yes.
And like not eating properly because I think we'll all kind of know this. It's difficult to know when there's going to be a disabled toilet that you can actually use. So
Yeah.
a lot of us will actively try and cut down the amount of time we have to do that.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where that behavior came from. But it's something I'm kind of trying to work on just now and reprogram with myself a little bit.
I agree with that, because as I get older, like my disability is not changing per se, but it's shifting to different areas of my body that I may use more than I did 10 years ago. So I feel like I'm constantly having to adapt, even though you would think, oh yeah, I've been living this way my whole life. I have to do things certain ways every time because that's how it'll go. But in reality, you do have bad days, you do have okay days, you do have good days, so you're always kind of trying to navigate through that. curvy road that you really don't know where it's gonna go. So I completely understand where you come with that.
I think
Yeah,
there's
Yeah.
my
there's sorry. I
oh
was just
sorry,
going
you
to
go
say, I
ahead.
think the issue is always going to be that CP doesn't come with a guidebook that tells you this is how CP works, because it's
Exactly.
so different for each individual and each body that I don't
Mhm.
think they could really give you one if they wanted to.
No.
Um, but that does mean that you kind of have to find your own way of doing things, and yeah, sometimes it's in ways that don't really make sense to other people. Um, or it's
Yeah,
just a struggle that you have to adapt.
right. And it might seem silly to someone else, but this is the only way I could say drink my coffee or eat my sandwich. It might seem like I'm being sloppy or being like slobbish, but no, I mean, I'm eating this. I need to do this, so totally, I
I think
get
that's
that.
something I worry about. Strangely, I think that's something I've always worried about is kind of how that looks to other people.
Right.
Like the way that we do things, does it look strange? But it's
I'm
something as I get older, I'm kind of getting coming away from. Um,
Yeah, I'm trying myself to do the same thing, not to think about how others perceive me, and more so, how do I perceive myself?
yeah,
Right, that's more important. Um, shifting again. Sorry. Has living in Scotland influenced how you experience disability or community support in any specific way? Because I know you used to travel to Florida often as a child, and I was wondering if there were any differences you noticed, or maybe not. Maybe they're all similarities.
I think the issues that we've kind of come up against in Scotland is the weather. Because you need
Yeah.
to have four different coats at all times because it will randomly just decide it's going to be one season and then another one.
Yeah.
Um, so like planning to do things is a bit of a pain. So like I said, everybody kind of has four jackets in their car.
Yeah.
Um, but I think community is always. I always found Scottish people very direct and quite blunt. And usually we'll kind of say if we make fun of you, it's actually because we like you.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that.
we can kind of come across as quite harsh, but
Yeah.
usually speaking, if we seem like we're being mean to you, we're actually trying to make you laugh. So no, I think there's a good sense of community, but you have to understand, how
Exactly.
people are.
It's your culture, right? You
Yeah,
Right.
kinda, what do you call it? Taking the piss?
you can say that. Uh, I mean,
I love that.
there's so many insults in Scottish that we would be here for another 3 hours if we went through them all. Um, but
I love
We
that.
yeah,
I
we
think
don't have
people.
any cool sayings.
Yeah, no. Pretty boring over here.
I did find when I went to Florida, everybody's uh, very enthusiastic, and it's hard to tell sometimes whether that's genuine or they're just,
Being
pretending.
fake.
I feel like a lot of the time it is fake. Like Americans are like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" Do they really care? No, it's just more like a greeting. Just very
Yeah,
superficial in a way.
It's
it's,
like when people ask you, how you're doing, what they want you to say is, I'm fine. And then they
Yeah,
go
I'm
on, they
good.
don't actually want you to say, and this is why.
yeah,
Exactly.
no.
It's not a genuine question.
They want it short and sweet. They want to focus on what they're doing. They don't want to take much time out. It's just, hi, how are you? Good. How are you? Bye. That's
No,
the
I
one
mean, to be
reason.
fair, we do that here as well.
Yeah.
But I think we kind of it's almost like we don't want to waste
time.
especially because the weather is rubbish. So if we meet you when you're outside and it's pouring, then we don't want to stand there and have a conversation if we don't want to. We'll just say, it's really nice to see you,
Yeah,
but bye.
it's really neat.
So there's a kind of honesty that I appreciate with Scottish people. More
Yeah,
often.
that's
Policy.
really cool. Can I ask you an off-topic question?
Sure.
So it's summer now in Scotland.
Supposedly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, supposedly, quote, quote.
Um,
So how many times does it rain during the week in summer in Scotland?
right. That depends on the summer.
Okay.
So some years we have nice summers, like this summer so far has been strangely sunny and there hasn't been a lot of rain
Okay.
for us, but we will have entire weeks where it will rain and
All week?
just rain.
Oh
Oh
my God,
man.
I get that. That's how it is here. It's literally gonna rain from today through crap, what is today? Today through Friday.
You're in Texas, right, Sonia?
Yeah, we get a lot of rain here.
You
Yeah,
have a
I
very
didn't know
flat
that.
state though, so
It's
What
so
was
bad.
that?
because it's a
Sorry.
very flat state, I would imagine
Yes.
that's a bit of an
Yeah,
issue.
it's so flat. Yeah, which I like about that. But yeah, we get like storms of rain.
I live in the rural Midwest, so um, we get thunderstorms during the summer, but it's not like every week. It's maybe every 2 weeks or maybe once a month, something like that. So
You guys have
no,
that nice thing where it will kind of rain overnight, just enough to
yeah,
water the plants, and then or
Right.
or
exactly.
you'll have
See,
like
that's the
bursts of
best.
rain. Yeah,
I
that
love
must be
how
nice.
we're talking about weather.
Oh no,
Like,
like
how did we get the weather?
oh,
Um,
it all comes round to weather here.
yeah,
It's never ending.
no, it doesn't. So back to the question, I wanted to follow up. Do you think the sense of community in Scottish towns or cities different in how they support or include disabled people?
Yeah, so
Them,
again, we have larger and smaller cities and towns. So just like you guys do. So
yeah.
I would say, and if you're in a big city, you're going to have more of a struggle accessing services, because the services are just stretched beyond their kind of capacity. You probably know people a lot more in like small villages and towns. People will actually know who you are, and then that will mean that should be easier. But then again, it's all cost. So, you won't have as many services on offer. It's just swings and roundabouts, as they say here. So,
Okay. And like in terms of getting to where you want to go, do you
mhm.
have like a service that drives you, or do you drive, or what?
so I
How's
take I
that?
take the train. I actually
Public
live right
Okay.
next
transport, right?
to
Yeah,
a train station. So if I can take the train, I'll take the train.
Oh,
that's
nice.
perfect.
Okay. So I want to switch segments to talk about your work as a writer, because I really think it's really cool what you do. How
Yeah.
did your writing journey begin? And was there a moment or a story that made you realize, wow, I love this, I have stuff to say, and this is the perfect platform to do it?
I think I've been writing since I was very small because um, I found speaking quite frustrating.
Hmm.
Um, I'll tell you a funny story actually about when I was learning to speak. So my mother, when I was learning to speak, took me to a speech specialist because she was concerned that I was sounded like I was running out of breath when I was speaking.
Mhm.
And so she took me to the therapist, and they said, well, the reason your daughter is running out of breath when she's speaking, which she is because her sentences are so complicated and long
Okay,
that
fancy.
she doesn't have the lung capacity to finish them. And so there we go. So basically, what I'm saying is I've always been a show off, I
Yeah,
think.
you're brilliant. We can say
Um,
that. Maybe you can't, but we can say.
but I found when I was speaking, because obviously speaking isn't instantaneous, you would sometimes say the wrong thing, or you kind of get put on the spot, and you would have to
Right.
come up with an answer that you maybe wouldn't have said if you had the
Exactly. Yes.
opportunity. Whereas when you write things down, you have enough space to say exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
Um,
and to
so-
think about what you're gonna say instead of just blurt it out, like
yeah,
word
and also
vomit,
it's like a
like I
record.
do.
Also, it's a record of what you've said at what time. So, that's why you should always be careful about what you write, I suppose. But
Yeah.
I've always just found it a much better way to communicate. But I didn't write professionally, so to speak, until I was 21 years old. Um,
A little side note: do you keep a journal
no,
throughout? Hmm.
Just
I'll
professional.
tell you why. Because Anthony would have read it.
Oh,
So,
hell no.
Oh
so
yes. By the
no,
way,
no.
guys, this is Anthony's sister, Layla. I didn't want to say it in the intro because she needs to have her own moments. But yes, this is Anthony's twin sister, Layla.
It's a poorly kept secret, to be fair, so it wasn't going to last long. No, my brother would have enjoyed reading that, so no, I don't keep a journal. I have, especially now, I kind of keep the mentality of, if I'm writing, I write to be seen and to be heard. I don't write for myself.
Mm,
So
I like that. I try to these 2 past years for my New Year's resolution thing. I say I'm gonna journal, and I do about 2 or 3 entries, and then I give up. And I don't know why, because I like it. I love reading them back, but it's like, God, I just can't stick to it. Like, I
It's a
like
lot,
it.
I will say. As
It
someone who
does.
does it 2 to 3 times a week, I've brought myself to that point. It's like sometimes I'm like, you're motivated sometimes, and it's like once you start, it's good. But other times I'm like almost low key forcing myself, which I know
Yeah.
ruins the point. But I'm like, I think it's so cool to like look back, and I'm not a very open person, so it's like a way for me to like get it out.
Yeah. I like
writing
it.
is good for that. But so when I was 21 years old, I joined a Glasgow writers group, and because I decided I wanted to do that as a career. So I thought I better find people who know what they're talking about,
Yeah.
which I did. Um, but what was quite funny was, when I started writing, I would never get any feedback,
Mhm.
Oh,
like good or bad. I would never get any feedback, and
Mhm.
so I was like, okay. And that frustrated me, because I'm like, how am I supposed to get better if I don't get
Right.
feedback? Like
Right.
that's
right.
really annoying. But everybody liked me, um, and that was kind of the issue. So I think after I'd been going there for about a year, um, one of the members said to me, "Oh, the reason you never got any feedback was because um, we weren't sure whether it would upset you or not, and nobody wanted to upset you." So
Right.
it was just like, oh,
Don't
okay,
upset the crippled lady. Yeah, I can
yeah,
see
like
that.
let's not make the wheelchair user cry in public. That's
All right. And I'm like, we don't need to
embarrassing for
sit around.
everybody. Yeah.
That's
Which I
funny.
get. Like, I totally get that. That would be embarrassing, and I can see why they want to avoid that. But yeah, it
Hmm.
wasn't going
A
to happen
whole
with me.
year though? That seems like a bit of a stretch.
Well, I think it was. I like to think it's just because they like me that much. They were just like, "Oh no, tell."
Okay. Well, that'll be kept in the episode. They like you that much.
I'm sure they'll tell me if otherwise, so that's fine. But
um,
What
but
inspired you
eventually,
to write Oh, sorry.
sorry, I was just going to say, eventually they did get back to me and they said, by the way, you're writing, the way you write is not good and you misuse
Oh,
punctuation. So,
wow.
which I totally did, by the way. So, how I got around that was I took commas out of my work for an entire year until I learned how to use them, and then I put them back in. So,
the tricky
So
little buggers.
confusing.
mm, really, I had really like long, stupidly complicated sentences that just nobody would want to read because, like, why would you? Um, so just like, yeah, once they started giving me feedback, I was like, you should have just told me this.
Yeah, that would have been good to
But
know in the beginning. Yeah.
yeah, so
I was curious, what kind of thing did you write about in this class? Was it a class or a writer's group?
it's a
Kind of.
writers group. So
Okay.
it was just when I first started, I'm quite into like fancy rating and things like that. So I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
write that essentially.
Okay.
Um, and I still have like a tendency to want to do that. I've just learned how um
Okay.
to do that a bit better because one of the issues that I was coming up against was when I was writing action scenes for things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can't really describe them accurately because I don't know how it feels to do things. You know,
Right.
like so if you're
Right.
saying this character is running, I can't
Mm-hmm.
then make it more interesting and say this character is running and this is what this feels like and describe it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually do me any good to write things like that because it's just outside of what I understand. So somebody else would actually have to come in and say, "This is how you do this," and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Okay." So again,
So
that's feedback I got eventually. So
that is super interesting and something I never thought about, you know. And I have similar things, I guess. I, how would I describe them if I never
yeah.
experienced it? That's kind of wild. So, were you making like short stories or stuff like that? Like
Initially,
fiction?
I thought I would write novels because I quite like
Okay,
novels.
okay.
And because I knew nothing about it, I thought that was quite easy as well. Oh, people write books, I can write books.
Hmm.
Um, Turns out not so easy.
Yeah, it's
So
very
yeah,
hard. This is a question for later, but
sure.
would you ever consider writing a novel, or is that just
Yeah, so
on the?
I have a concept that I'm working on at the moment.
Oh, nice. How much time do you put into something like that? Like, how do you schedule your time? Because it's such an abstract thing. I mean, yes, you sit down and you type, but it's also where the ideas coming from, and do you have research and all that stuff?
It depends. It depends on the concept that you're working from, but strictly speaking, I've never had a problem with the idea aspect of writing. I get
Okay,
lots of ideas for different things, and it's just finding one that works for me.
that's so
Um,
nice. Yes.
Makes you a bit of again, it makes you a bit strange.
Yeah,
Um,
that's okay though, right? We
yeah, no,
discussed
I'm
this.
okay with that. But yeah, you do look at things and you think, could write
That
about
is
that
so.
all the time. Like,
I think I love reading myself, and I only come up with my ideas if I really sit down, I take all my distraction away, like my phone, and I click off Facebook, and I like really focus in and hone in on just typing. Is only when I get my ideas, they just don't come to me. So that's pretty great that they come to you, and they come to you all the time. It's kind of like your own little superpower,
A
if you
little
will.
bit. So it's kind of it can be a negative thing as well though, because it's one of those I don't know if you're the type of person, because I've just learned that people's brains work differently, to the point where sometimes like I'm one of these people that can hear my own voice in my head, and it
What?
Okay.
turns out that that's not something everybody can do. Um,
No.
so I hear my own voice in my head. So sometimes when I get ideas, I will literally, it's like Chinese water torture of myself,
Really?
talking to myself until I do something. So
That's
that's not particularly
interesting.
fun, but it gets,
Huh?
you can kind of train it.
Are
So
you one of those people who have like a photogenic memory as well?
I wish I was. That would be very helpful.
Both of
Um,
our too smart. That's overpowered.
I'm quite a visual person, but not in that way. So I will see things, and quite often I see things for possibilities rather than what's there.
Wow, that's
So
I need to take a page out of your book, girl,
I don't
because
think you want to. I think you'll find it very dark and very long.
I
Um,
think I do though. I kind of like it.
well, when
um,
we get on to talking about life coaching, maybe we can talk about that a bit more.
alright,
Um,
we'll save it. What what inspired you to write a column, and what kind of themes do you gravitate towards? And maybe
uh,
that's not the best question. Like, would you want to talk about how you got your job at the column first, and
I
then
can I can do both. This is no problem.
okay,
So I was working for a disability charity, a local disability charity here, and
Nice.
I was helping them one day with one of the booths they were doing, because they had this big event they were running and they wanted me to be on a booth. So basically, what my job was to sit at the booth and to answer questions if anybody had questions. So say if they like couldn't find things in the event, then I would say, oh, that booth is over there. Thankfully, they'd
oh
given
yeah,
me a map, otherwise they would have never found that. Um, I'm not naturally gifted in geography. It's one of my worst things. I'm so bad with
me
directions.
too.
It's
Terrible.
actually horrendous. But uh, I was sitting next to the magazine I now work for, and I wasn't feeling particularly like my skills were in the best place when I was working for the other charity. Um, I don't feel like it was the right place for me. So because I had a wee bit of time, I just said, "Oh, uh, what's your magazine about?" And like leant over and read an issue, and the woman that I spoke to was lovely, and she was just saying they're always looking for volunteers, and if I wanted to do that, I could. So the more I had kind of come away from writing at that point, because I think I was just finishing playing basketball. So I didn't do a lot of writing for 5 years because I was playing basketball, wheelchair basketball, and I couldn't do both.
Right.
So yeah, it's probably not a skill set you want to use together. Um, but yeah, so I thought I'd quite like to get back into writing, and if I can write in a way that will help me learn, and also it'll be, I'll actually get published. That would be
Mm,
nice, because I'd had a couple of things published,
That's
and
so.
small things by then, but not for quite a long time. So it was just a case of they asked me if I wanted to volunteer, and I said, yeah, sure, as I do. And
yeah.
then, so I wrote, and they said, write an introduction about yourself. And I said, right, okay. I said, what's the, usual thing? How many
Mm-hmm.
words do you want? Like, what tone do you want? That
Right.
sort of thing. So I asked the question, and then I went away and I wrote. It was supposed to just be an introduction to the editor that works there. And so I sent this via email. And she sent me an email. The lady that runs the volunteers, manages the volunteers, sent me an email back saying, "Well, I'm in tears, and the
Oh,
editor is crying, and I was like, why? Like, I thought it was quite like I felt like I was being positive, so I couldn't understand
right.
why it
I
had
mean,
upset them. And they
yeah.
were just like, "Oh, it's just so uplifting." Like, so what I wrote is that was meant to be an introduction ended up being my first piece that was published in the magazine because they just
Oh,
took it and
wow.
printed it. So there we go.
Wow.
So it wasn't to
Man.
answer your question. It probably wasn't actually intentional. But yes, I like it. I like the word count and the length, and I like the format of it as well.
Oh, man.
It,
Can I read it? Can you send it to me? I'd love to read
uh,
it.
so at the moment we're renewing our website, and I'm
Okay.
hoping one of the things we're meant to be adding into it is hopefully a section for every volunteer. So
Okay.
Oh,
shortly you should be able to see a section with my name on it, and then go back and see my articles.
Oh, I'd
yeah.
At
love
the
to
moment you
see
have to
it.
go
Please
back.
send the link.
Yeah, so at the moment you have to go back and look at individual issues and then find my work. But we do print copies, and the print copies are lovely.
Oh, that's
Oh,
And
so
I always
man.
think it looks much better in the print copy than it does online.
Uh,
So to answer your
Mhm.
question, yes, I can send that to you. Um,
thank you.
Thank you.
uh, but
um,
yeah.
how do you balance personal storytelling in your column with broader messages in your writing?
So I think for me, you always have to think about audience, right? And what
Mhm.
your intentions are when you write. So when I write things about disability and I write about my life, my intention is always to educate and to entertain a little bit as well. So I like to put things in a way that is accessible to most people so that at minimum they can take away one line that I've either written or said and just take that away with them. Like one
That's
thing. I only really aim for one thing, one line, and
And
if I manage to do
isn't that typically what people keep in their memory? Like, after reading something, they can only, like, to make a good article, they could summarize in, like, a sentence or less. Is
Mhm.
that what you're kind of getting to or saying?
So I kind of see it this way. Have you ever
Okay.
have you ever been to a museum?
Yes.
I would hope you've all been to museums. And
same.
yeah, I would hope so. So, you go to a museum and there's so many things to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not possible to see everything and to read everything while you're there.
Right.
That's life to me, right? Life is like
Yeah.
that. We're all busy. We've got our own stuff going through. But
Yeah.
usually speaking, we will find one thing that we find interesting and we
Take
remember when we leave. Well, that's kind of how I see my writing. I want to leave them with
Wow.
one thing
Beautiful.
that they'll remember.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that. I had a similar experience. I wrote this speech for a company. I just had to describe my, my me being a mother with CP to a able-bodied child. They
sure.
wanted to look at things through that angle, basically.
Sure.
And when I had done giving my speech, I saw that everyone was crying, and I'm like, a little taken back. You know, I didn't think it was sad, but the way they interpreted it was much more than I thought it was, for sure. Much more uplifting. So it I do share that experience, and it was really odd. You know,
I think I think it's two things, right?
okay.
One, I think it's when you live with a disability like we do, we forget some of the struggle because
Mm-hmm.
we just want
Yeah.
to be able to do what we want to do, right? So if we focused on everything that we're struggling on doing, we probably wouldn't leave the house and we wouldn't achieve very much. So,
Right.
we have a kind of perspective of, right, it might be difficult, but today I got to do this thing. So we will look at that thing that we managed to do and not
Yeah.
look at. So it's essentially like we're looking at the destination instead of the journey.
Yeah.
Whereas able-bodied people will sometimes look at disabled people, and I find more often than not, will look at disabled people and unless they know better, will look at the things that make us different as opposed to the things that make us the same. And they will
Literally.
kind of put their own fear of the unknown onto disabled people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they just assume they try and put themselves in our shoes, which is always silly because shoes are the hardest thing to find as a disabled person, right? It
Yeah.
just it's,
They always felt like,
the
oh,
hardest thing. So I don't know why they do it, but they do.
Oh,
So they try and put themselves in our shoes and they imagine what they think they would feel if they were in our situation, but they aren't.
no.
So I can kind of see why they go, oh, that must be really difficult, and they get caught up in the struggle as opposed to the destination. So
Yeah.
it's just that difference. It's the difference between us as disabled people knowing what disability is and them imagining what disability must be like. And for them, it will be different as well. That's the thing. Because we are born with a disability, I often say to people, because they say, oh, that must be really hard. And it's like, well, yes, it is. But also, I don't know any differently. That's my
Yeah.
yeah,
life. So I don't spend the entire time feeling sorry for myself because I don't know any differently and I just want to do things. So yeah, it's just it's something completely out with people's perceptions and you can't actually expect them to understand either.
No.
no,
It's
it's
no,
something
I
they have
don't
to
think
really
it's
get.
fair to actually
It's
expect people to
yeah.
understand.
It's not there, and for them to expect to know how we feel or to understand what we go through, but you do. I do require respect at least. You don't
Yeah,
have to be condescending either. It's such a fine line that is often crossed, unfortunately, I feel. But I I think you already maybe answered this, but do you find writing to be a form of therapy in a way? Because you're you're saying what you want to, and you get to put it out there.
yeah. Writing for me is probably one of the biggest challenges I do. Um, from the perspective of it's probably the only thing I hold myself to a certain standard for.
Absolutely.
So I have a kind of black and white standard when it comes to writing because essentially when you write to be published, publishers and people you work for have a black and white, this is what we want. And
Exactly.
so that kind of gives me a black and white thing of, well, if I fulfill all of these things, I then get published. So I kind of have the perspective of um, I need to do certain things to achieve publication, which is what I want.
Right.
So I hope
Do
that
you
answered the
ever
question.
do you ever feel like you have to be more because you are disabled, or you have to show up so much or give so much
Yeah,
more because you have
definitely.
this.
And I actually feel like writing is one of the only places, is probably the only thing that puts me in an even kind of playing field with everybody else.
Okay.
Because when I write, it's my name and what I've written that
Mhm.
represents me. They don't know anything about me. You know,
That's
they're
true.
not judging me by seeing me, they're judging me by seeing my work. And my
True.
work
Yeah.
speaks for itself.
That's
So
true.
that's one of the great joys of writing is just um I can be just as good, if not better, than some people um that that write. So
I'm sure you're way better than a lot of people. You you don't have to say it, but I can. You write you write from a perspective that isn't always visible.
mm,
Um, excuse me, in mainstream media.
yeah,
What's your take on disability, especially CP, that's portrayed in media or literature today? Can't say that word.
it's a difficult one, that one.
Yeah.
So I think you've got two perspectives, right, when it comes to
Okay.
disability. You've got charities and people who work around disability who want to for you to support them and ultimately to give you for you to give them money,
Right.
right? So when they're looking at disability, they're kind of looking at it from a quite a negative perspective of they want you to feel sorry for this person so that you will give them money,
Right.
right? So that's one perspective that we see, and
Mhm.
that's quite prevalent. And then you've got the other aspect of disability, which is rarer, but it's on TV, and it's done by and this is changing thankfully, but largely it's done by people who are not disabled, trying to represent people who are disabled.
Mhm.
Also written by people who don't have a disability.
Mhm.
So yeah. So I don't think the representation of disability. I think there's a lot of bias, and it depends on what essentially what they're trying to get out of it as to how
Mhm.
they represent disability, right? Because you've also got newspapers and people like that who want to sell newspapers, so they'll come up with stories that aren't necessarily true. Like a lot of newspapers here will talk about. Uh, so we have benefits here that support people with disabilities who can't work. So there's a
Okay.
lot of newspapers at the moment that will say, oh, there's this large population of people claiming this benefit that aren't entitled to it. And it's all kind of trying to make people angry about that. So there's also that
Right.
aspect of it. Um, but I touched on it a wee bit, I think, in the previous question. I think the issue we have as a community, as the disabled community, is we should be representing ourselves
Mhm.
and we should be advocating for ourselves and we should be and there is and I totally understand why there's a large percentage of the population of disabled people who think that we shouldn't educate because we shouldn't have to. Society should just
Take care
understand
of it.
us
Yeah.
and do what we need them to do, right? But
Mhm.
as I've previously said and we've been discussing, you're asking people to understand something they cannot possibly understand.
Mhm.
We are the only people that can understand what we're going through and express it in a way that is understandable to people who don't have knowledge. But if we don't want to do that for ourselves, how are they supposed to learn?
Right.
So I always think that yes, it would be nice not to have to educate people on disability, but in reality, I'd rather speak for myself and have people
Mhm.
get it right than have someone else speak for me, as often happens. I'm sure you'll agree. People like to
Yeah.
speak for people, as you know, they'll get it wrong. I'll get it right.
Yeah.
And
I
I would
think
rather take the punches for what I've said and what I've done than have to deal with the consequences of somebody speaking on my behalf. So I think that's where
Yes,
I come from.
I I agree, and I think there's some parents of children with disabilities that sometimes take it a bit too far and take away their voice, um, trying to, you know, uh, keep them from harm or keep them from embarrassment or keep trying to protect them. And
Well, it comes from both fear and love.
yeah,
Right? So they're afraid that they're going to go through this hard life and struggle and be
yeah,
sad and and as a parent, nobody wants their child to suffer or not to be happy. Like I can totally understand that too. But I think what parents have to remember is if you do not build independence with your child, at the day and time that you are not there, they have to
yeah,
be able to manage without you. And if you've made
exactly.
them dependent on you to the point where they can't function without you, which is inevitable just through the
Yeah,
process of aging,
yeah,
you're not going to be around. So you need to raise your disabled children to be
yes,
able to, such an ableist way of saying this, but there's not enough. This is the other thing. There's not enough ways to describe things in a non-ableist way. But you need
right,
to raise your disabled children in a way that they can support themselves
right,
and
and
they can, have as much independence as
right,
possible. But
because
there's so
and
many factors to that I
there
can
is,
double.
there is, so it's very it's daunting when I see. I hope it's just Reddit stuff that I'm reading, but I read so much stuff about, parents just being way too overprotective. And I think if I was in that child situation or teenager, whoever they were, I'd be going crazy. Even, you know, if maybe all I can do is put on my sock, let me do that. Let
Yeah,
me try. Maybe I'll be able to put on one leg in my pants if I work up to it. So, yeah.
but the thing
Yeah.
is,
Oh,
you're never going to know what you're capable of if you do not try.
right.
And I think my mother, so in my family, my mother was very protective, and my mother wanted to make my life as easy as possible, so she did a lot for me. And
Right.
what that meant was when my mother was unavailable, I didn't know how to function. So
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
I lived a lot of my life, probably the largest percentage of it, being afraid of what
Mm-hmm.
my mother was afraid of. My mother was afraid of quite a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it's not until recently that I've discovered that actually you need to, firstly, you need to know yourself, which
Mm,
if somebody's making all your decisions for you, you don't know who you are.
yeah.
You know who they tell you you are,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know yourself. So,
Yes.
you know, I I I can totally get why it's a difficult thing to do, but when you advocate for a disabled child, you have to advocate in a way that teaches them to advocate for themselves.
Right.
So you only advocate as far as until they are capable
Yeah.
and as far as they are capable. Um,
It's hard. It's very hard.
and that's a conversation I have quite often with my sister because I have a niece with a disability.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when we found out that she was going to have a disability. That was one of the main discussions we had was how do we do this in the best way?
Right.
And recently I did a speaking event, and that was one of the questions I got during the question portion from a very nice lady who basically asked me what was the best way to advocate for her son. And I said, I'll just give you the advice that I gave my sister, which is teach them who they are.
Mm-hmm.
because the world will spend 99% of their time telling them who they are, who they think they should be, what they should
Who
be
they
doing,
should be,
what they
right?
want, what they need, and what to expect. Now, if you, as in your own skin, don't know these things, how are you going to make it better for yourself? How are they
Right.
going to get it right?
How are you gonna be brave enough to go against the narrative too? How are you gonna push the walls if you don't have enough confidence in who you are and
Well,
what you know and what you are capable of to have that bravery to say no? I can't do this, I will do this, I can't do this job, but yeah, it's very important.
that's part of our responsibility is to
Yeah,
A, learn that, and B, articulate that to other people.
yes.
Because I
Yeah,
think if we're not honest about what living with a disability is, then how are people supposed to know?
yeah,
So I think that's why I write what I write in the way that I write it, because it's like I will try and make it accessible and I try and make it positive, but I don't write bullshit. I will
yeah,
be really honest with you. This was difficult, but I managed to overcome it. That's how I'm positive. It's not a sugar coated thing, it's a very honest thing. Um, so I like to kind of make sure I keep it that way.
as you should, and as I'm sure your readers want you to keep it as. Yeah, I think that's why people gravitate to this podcast because we try, and I think we do a good job at it, to just be transparent, as ugly as it is, just to show people, hopefully spread some knowledge about uh, our moments and our life, whatever challenges, achievements, whatever we say in, a little intro.
And it's so important to do that. And it's also so important to have a dialogue between disabled people so that we can compare experiences and, use that as a way to empower us instead of a way to isolate us. Because we're already
Amen.
isolated.
Yeah.
So if we're
And it,
talking to each other, then that's much better.
yeah.
Um,
And I think it's easy for us to isolate because we feel safest, We feel safe tucked away. We won't face any judgment except the judgment we put on ourselves. So,
yeah,
yeah.
and it's completely it's just not straightforward to go out and I have
No.
this term that I'm kind of working on at the moment called safe adventuring, right? So
Yes.
that's what I like to do. I like to safe adventure.
I
But
do
what
too, I think.
that means is I know that I'm going to get from point A to point B and I know
Yeah.
what I'm going to face,
Yeah,
more or less, right?
I think you're our first wheelchair user guest too. And I think there's much more you that goes into planning. Just being honest, right? I'm sure there's much more you have to do in terms of just getting out the door for the day than someone who can walk or use crutches. So
Yeah, it's to do with the fact that society is not built for us, and it shouldn't
no.
be built for us because we are essentially not the majority and we're not the norm.
Hmm.
So it's not built for everybody's needs in general, but yeah, it should be built a little bit better. And
Yeah.
I'd like to think that it's working towards that. But yeah, a lot of what then happens is you're expected to plan more and you're also
Yeah.
expected to bring people with you that know what to do
Hmm.
so that if you meet people that don't know what to do then it's not such a big problem, but
Yeah.
I don't tend to live my life that way. In fact, I quite
No.
actively will If I'm told I'm supposed to book ahead, I will quite actively not do that. Because I want to make the point of, well, nobody else leaves their house and has to plan their entire day.
Right.
Why can't I just leave my house and have, fair enough, like some things you do need to book, like if I was going somewhere and say I was taking more than one train and I wanted to be somewhere for a particular time, I have to plan that.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily have to plan the way back. Like, I don't need to say, and I'll finish having fun at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
and then I'll come home. Like, I can just do what everybody else does and see how the day goes and see how I feel and then decide when I want to come home.
Yeah, and you live by train, you said, right?
Yeah, most of the time
So
it's back.
I'm sure you specifically pick the place you want to live in order to have that accessible to you,
I
right?
didn't actually.
Oh no.
That would be what I would do. So essentially, I live in council housing. So I'm trying to think of the right term for you to understand. So um, it's like what you would do if somebody was homeless and they got put in like particular housing. So in the areas that we live, the council, as they're called, um, have a selection of houses that they own that they
Okay.
can offer to people at a reduced rate. So I probably pay less rent than say if I definitely if I owned, but definitely also if I privately let my flat, it would be a lot more expensive.
Right.
So my housing is paid by the benefits that are paid to me.
Okay.
It's then paid for. So yeah, essentially I didn't pick where I live. The council offered me where I
Oh well.
live and I accepted it
So
or not.
it was a happy coincidence then.
I am particularly lucky. So I've just moved I moved in October
Okay.
to where I live now, and now it's a purpose-built, like accessible house,
Oh,
and it has
nice.
changed my life.
Can we
So
visit you? Do you have a guest house?
I don't have a guest house. It sounds a lot fancier than it is. It's
A
essentially a big
guest
flat.
room? I'll
I know
sleep
where the
on your
nearest
couch.
hotel
Place
is.
on the floor.
I know where the nearest hotel is. I can point you to that. It's not far.
I'll sleep on your couch.
Oh, you'll be sleeping next to the dog. I don't think you'd like that.
We'll
Um,
just cuddle up to each other. It'll be nice. Nothing I'm not used to. That's for sure. We want to be a voice for the CP community, offering our experiences, insight, and advice. We want to help anyone feeling alone. We are your CP friends. Hopefully, along the way, we can change the narrative on CP one episode at a time.